It's Wednesday. Welcome to our Wednesday wellness tip. So today's tip is a spiritual tip. And this is a story, it's a fable that I once heard about an African king. He grew up with his confidant, and anytime, no matter what would happen, his confidant would always say, "This is good, this is good." So one day, the king and his confidant were getting ready to go out hunting. And so his confidant loaded his gun, was loading the king's gun, and all of a sudden it went off unexpectedly, and it blew the king's thumb right off of his hand. And so, of course, the confidant responded with, "This is good." Well, the king was furious. He's like, "You just blew my thumb off. How can you say this is good?" And he got so angry. So he had his other army throw him in the dungeon because he was so upset with his friend, his confidant. So that's what happened. His friend got thrown in the dungeon. So sometime later, the king goes out hunting, and he was captured by a group of cannibals. So they were going to tie him up. They got him. They were ready to tie him up. They were ready to light the fire. And then one of them noticed that his thumb was off. Well, they had a superstition that they would never eat a person who was not whole. So they ran away and left the king there. He was so elated. He's like, "Oh my gosh, my friend was right. This is good." So he rushes back to the kingdom. He rushes down to the dungeon and he says, "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry you've spent all this time down here in the dungeon." And he said, "You were right. This is good." And again, his friend responded, "This is good." And the king's like, "How can you say this is good? You've been in the dungeon." He said, "Because if I had not been down in the dungeon, I would have been with you." So you get what would have happened. Then his friend would have been eaten by the cannibals. So this is an important spiritual tip. Because if we would just approach everything as this is good, and before we just jump to a negative conclusion about a situation, if we could just relax and look for the good, look for all the possible good that could come or happen from a situation. This is not always easy, but sometimes time will give us a perspective so that we can see that, yes, this is good.